Hey, everybody, welcome back. This is Eddy Hood at the Cash Flow Debates, a podcast hosted by Ignite Spot Outsourced Accounting. And I'm with my esteemed business partners today, Dan Luthi and Ryan Steck. And today we're going to be talking about something called the endowment effect and how it's really challenging the way you're making good business decisions and how it could ultimately lead you down a path of unprofitability, which is what we want to prevent today. We want to make sure that at the end of this episode, you're seeing your business, your people, your marketing campaigns in a very clear and logical light. And we're trying to remove some of that emotional connection you might have with the things that you've done so that you can, at the end of the day, know you're doing the best for your business. So this relates to something called sunk costs. It's the idea of having put a bunch of money, time, and energy into something, and now it's messing up your decisions. So if sunk cost is a new term to you, I'll explain the endowment effect in just a minute, but I'm going to have these gentlemen explain sunk cost. This is a term that is often taught in accounting classes. It's a very common term that we're exposed to thousands of times throughout our education. But Ryan, tell us what a sunk cost is.
Yeah, a lot of people take it a different way, but ultimately how we look at it is we say, you've put time, energy, money, you've put something into your business and it's not going to give you anything back.
Right.
And so it's putting something in, not getting anything back in return for what it is you're spending money on.
So when you say putting something in, you're talking about the hard work of being a business owner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the late nights, the blood, the sweat, the tears, all the stuff that nobody sees. You've done that work.
Right.
Maybe you're emotionally vested in something. Maybe you took a huge risk and you put your kid's college fund at risk to get this business started. And so now it's like, not only is the money in there, my kid's future is tied into this. So you get these sort of layers of stress and anxiety tied into all of your decisions, which means that it's going to be really hard to adjust or deviate from that path now. Right. And what's the problem with that?
The problem with that is you put in these sunk costs, you kind of put these blinders on because honestly, you start going down this path and you're going down this path of, I put this time, I put this money, I put this energy, I put my emotion, I put all of this into this idea. It's hard to see that it's not going to work.
Or that it's a bad idea. Yeah. Right. Not every idea is a good idea. So Dan, what's your thought on what a sunk cost is?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece for me with sunk cost is that realization, specifically with people who are trying to sell their business, who they perceive their business as worth more than what the market says a business is worth. For that context, I mean, a business may only be able to sell it between, say, 1.2 times top line revenue or EBITDA or whatever it is, and you're looking at it and saying, man, but I put 10 years of my energy and time and effort into this, and I think it's worth 3x from that perspective. And so you put yourself into a situation where your negotiation for potentially selling your business is stuck on that emotion of what you put into it. The reality of it is you're never going to get back, in most cases, what you put into it, or you already received compensation for that effort you put into it. So it's not relating to what the value is today because you're thinking about what was done historically. If it's in the past, it's been spent.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's called sunk, because it's gone. I mean, it's no longer here. We can't try to revalue what's going on with it. We can only move forward and look at perceived value in context. And the same thing with houses, and same thing with time and energy you put into employees.
Plus, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Right? Like the investor doesn't care at all about the hours you put in or the time, the energy. All they care about is something called a balance sheet, and if the numbers on that are accurate. And the idea here is if I put money in, I got to be able to get money back out at a certain point in time. I know, Ryan, you've got something called the rule of three, which we'll get to in a minute. But I don't think people care as much about you as you think they do. They don't care about the pain that you've gone through, the trials you've gone through. All that matters right now is the business as it stands today. And if I were to walk into your business and take a picture of its economic activity, that's all I care about, right? Another thing, Dan, you and I have talked about this in the past, is sometimes entrepreneurs, when they're trying to sell a business, they not only think about everything that they have put in, all of the hardship, but they're thinking about what they have to get out of the rest of their life. Because if I sell this business and I'm 38 years old, for example, well, I need to have $30 million in my bank account in order to retire in a lifestyle that I want. So we're just going to take that 30 mil and we're just going to tack that on because that's what I need in order to live the life I want, right? So we have expectations from being justified for what we've done. We have expectations for what we're going to need. All this stuff messes up our decision making and makes it really, really hard. So what I'm hoping to do today is talk about some very specific decision situations you're going to be in as a business owner. We're going to talk with these guys about how to approach those decisions so that you're a little more removed from the emotional aspect of it, and you can make a logical decision that will help you build real wealth in the company versus emotional debt. That's a real term that I love. Emotional debt is this idea that as you go through experiences, you build up hatred, you build up anxiety, you build up stress, you build up expectations from people, and you're expecting them to pay you back, right? There's this weird, unintangible debt that nobody's ever going to pay back, but you're holding on to these ledgers, right? These emotional ledgers, and it's the same thing with things in your business. So, okay, actually, I need to talk really quickly about something called the endowment effect, because this will get us started off in this discussion. So the endowment effect is a psychological term that points to the fact that if you own something, you value it at a much higher price tag than somebody who doesn't own it would, right? So once you buy a home, it instantly goes up in value in your mind. You think, this is my home, it's now great, it's grand, and you're going to put a bunch of time and energy into it. So you just automatically think it's worth more than it is. It's the same thing with the car that you drive. It's the same thing with the school that you send your kids to, right? You seem to think that school's better than other schools because that's where you go, and that's the school that is in your life. So the endowment effect is really sort of diabolical when it comes to being a business owner, because you own your business, you have employees, you have started a marketing campaign, you have launched all sorts of different products. All of these things are you have some ownership over, so you don't always see them as clearly as you should. So with that on the table, let's talk about this idea of selling a business a little bit more. And Ryan, I'd love, because you sit at the table all of the time with entrepreneurs as a CFO, right? Your job is to be the financial brain at a table, and often there are lawyers there. You've got the purchasing party, you've got your client there, and those are really sort of complex, emotionally charged conversations. They last months sometimes. What's your insight into that in terms of sunk costs?
Yeah, so from a sunk cost standpoint, we always look at it and say, well, I've built something, or I've built an idea, I've built a business, I've built something. And to everything we've been talking about, we value it more than someone else does. They don't see everything that we've put into it. And so when you're assessing an idea, when you're selling a business, when you're doing anything, you have to understand what it's worth to someone else. And specifically in the example of selling a business, I always say, put yourself in the shoes of the buyer.
Yep.
What would they be willing to do? And I call it the rule of three, is what I generally deal with when I'm helping someone buy or sell a business, which is to say, within 3 or 4 years of this business being acquired, who's ever buying it should be able to get their money back. And so if I'm going to come in and buy your business, I better be able to see that I'm going to make my money back in 3 or 4 years. Otherwise, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Couldn't you take that money and go find a better way to make your money back? Like, you don't even make money in 3 or 4 years in this example. You're just trying to get your back.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times business owners, when they're selling their business or selling their idea, don't understand that we're just trying to get what you spent back. We're not even trying to make money. We're just trying to get it back. And so we have these blinders where these sunk costs, they kind of control us a little bit. And all of a sudden we spent $50,000 on something, but we made $2,000 this month. So we get excited because we made $2,000. Well, no, now you're negative $48,000. And that's really where you're at.
Well, and I think it's like sentimental. Like we get into these positions that things mean way more to us. And to you guys' point, it's all psychological in a lot of cases. I think for me, like one of the simplest examples is like we were actually watching home videos the other day as a family. And my daughter was like, well, why don't we still have that? That was something I loved when I was a kid. I played with that toy so much and this and this and this. And it's like, you didn't realize that thing got a hole in it.
Yeah.
And I lost all its stuffing. And then it started to smell weird. And then the dog got into it. It's like, there was no chance we had to it, but I loved it, Dad. Why didn't you fix it and make it work?
Experiences with this.
Yeah. But it's the same thing with our businesses. Like, we think about the blood, sweat, and tears and energy and effort we put into things. We think about what we hope to be able to share it as in the future. We're trying to build a legacy or whatever it is in that concept. And your perceived value is not the same perceived value that other people have off of those pieces. And so that to me is also part of that context too, is whatever you put into a business from your time, energy, and effort is not going to be perceived in the same value when you go to sell or bring other investors or things like that in. And we have to be comfortable accepting that.
Yeah. Now we're not telling you to just like give your business away for free. That's not what we're saying. And in fact, your business might be worth $20 million more than you think it's worth, right? You never know. That's why you need a qualified person to do a business valuation for you, which is a whole art in and of itself before you go and sell this thing. But what we're trying to get at today is that we work with a lot of business owners who are serial entrepreneurs, right? They get a new idea, and so it's easy to bust out a new LLC. And now I've got that going. I've got 18 LLCs happening. I'm putting time into all of them and money into all of them. And very few of those are actually working out and really earning you some cash. And so what we're trying to say is that you need to have some rules of the game set up to protect yourself from sunk costs, so that if that new LLC you just started isn't actually performing the way you had hoped in 6 or 12 months, that the rules of the game tell you, shut that one down, invest in this one, right? Not keep going with it because it's cute and you like it, right? It doesn't matter if you like it. It doesn't matter if you've put time into it. So one of the things I've always liked is to say, for me personally, to give any new thing in my life 6 months of like, I need enough time to test it in the market and to see how people respond to it, and then a fixed dollar amount that I'm comfortable with losing, right? It has to be the amount of money that I could go to my wife and say, I'm going to write a check and burn it. Are you okay with that, right? And if she can say, yep, I'm okay with that, then I know I can lose that money and we're fine. So that might be 10 grand, it might be $1,000, it might be 100 grand, depending on your own personal finances, whatever it is. But I think if you define a set time and a set dollar amount, and then at that set time at 6 months say, is this doing what I thought it was going to do? Have I gotten my money back? Has it, where am I at? Then you can logically say, let's keep putting money into this, or we got to shut this thing off. Curious to know what you guys think about a strategy like that.
I know of a few business owners that we've worked with in the past that actually set limits as partners. They decide, hey, we're willing to do, like, you get two $10,000 bets a year per person.
Oh, that's cool.
And no one couldn't question it. It's the opportunity for you to test and try something new, whether it's a technology, whether it's a system, whether it's a new potential revenue stream. But they get $10,000 twice a year on 2 different ideas to kind of build something new and try something new. And I love that they actually put constraints around it that says no one gets to question the choice. Like, they've accepted that, hey, we'll lose $40K a year and we're okay with this. No big deal. But it gives that person the opportunity to think and love and connect to it. But it also has the boundary that pulls them back in at the end that says, did it bear fruit?
Yeah.
Did it return what we hoped for it? And is it an idea that's worth valuing? But again, as a business owner, you have to kind of determine those pieces as you're making decisions, as you're kind of maneuvering through it. People are the same context. Sometimes you love the way someone interviews, and then you realize 3 months in, they're just not getting the way your system works. You have to be comfortable at that point in time saying, man, I know I spent 3 months on this person, but are they going to get me to step 2, step 3, step 4? Are they going to be the right piece for us? And I think that's really hard as a business owner to accept, and sometimes because you're emotional with people versus systems. You're connected to it. So it adds more of that more sunk emotional cost versus dollar cost, because you're connected to it emotionally because you see a face or a smile, or the story of the person behind it. I know your kids' names. Oh, 100%.
I know your kids' names. I can't. So let's switch to that then. So we've talked about how to sort of value your business. It might be worth much more than you think, but it probably is more likely the opposite way, where you think it's worth more than it is. And you need to disassociate yourself from that. But also the idea that if you're going to start new businesses, good for you. You should be doing that, but have some rules set up before you do it. Otherwise, you'll just keep funneling money to it. And I cannot tell you how many businesses I've seen go out of business because the small idea completely cannibalized the cash flow of the healthy business, right? It just completely ruined it. And it's because the entrepreneur got so excited that they got blind. This has to work, this has to work, this has to work. And it just isn't working. And they can't see that. But let's switch to people, right? Because Dan, as you pointed out, and you're sort of very involved in the hiring process in our firm. So pretty much every resume comes across your desk. You usually have to meet all of these accountants and what have you. Have we ever had an accountant in our firm that we should have let go, but we held on to for way too long?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
We don't need to say names.
Yeah, no.
Like,
well,
why does that happen?
Definitely. I'm sure, and I will say this, I'm sure some of the people on our team felt the same way about me at points in time too.
Let this guy go.
Yeah, why is this guy here? But no, it's the time investment to get someone up to speed on how you do things or work in your ideology or your path is hard.
Yeah.
But also, to the same point in time too, as someone who's trying to keep things going, and maybe you're running on a tight team budget, resources from that perspective, you don't want to have to start over because you're afraid of, well, we put so much time into it. We're okay accepting less from this individual. Hey, we want, maybe we set a target of they're supposed to produce $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 worth of revenue for you every month or whatever it is. And they're producing a third of the expectation. Mm-hmm. But you're like, man, but I like this person. They're a good human. Like we enjoy hanging.
They're a good culture
fit.
They're
good culture fit. Yeah. And I think that's a very common ideology is they fit the way people know. They love them. They connect with them. They think they're a wonderful person or they're brilliant. Look at their backstory. Look at all these things.
He pointed at me when he said they're brilliant.
I'm waving and talking. Yeah, definitely.
Take it.
We think these people are brilliant in some capacity, but they just don't mesh with your system overall. Or your system changes. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a good example of it too. It's like you're running a position where you have someone who works in your system in your organization for a while, and you have to shift to match the market. Mm-hmm. And they aren't comfortable shifting. So you have to feel at some point in time too, can we continue to exist with this person, or truly can we cut the person as a part of our system to be able to get where we need to be? And man, it's so hard, especially with people. People are so much harder than systems. Yeah. Systems. You
have to sit down and have a hard conversation.
100%. When you know them, you know what they've given you up to that point in time. Like you're connected to them extremely emotionally. And I think that's one of the hardest parts about dealing with humans as a part of what we do is we care. Yeah. Like we really do. And it's hard when you care.
So Ryan, you are, as the CFO to many, many, many businesses around the country, a lot of your conversations stem around management of labor, right? Like,
sure,
because labor is such a huge cost to a business. What are your thoughts on helping an entrepreneur deal with this? If they've got somebody on their staff that they know is not pulling their weight, or that they're paying twice the wage they should be for the work that's being performed or whatever. Like, how do you approach this?
Become heartless. So, I mean, ultimately, this is the hard part is we're in business for a reason.
Yeah.
And the problem with being a business owner is it becomes our life. And these people become, as you're talking about, emotionally attached and everything else. But we have to be able to pull back and look at a spreadsheet. We have to be able to pull back and say, I expect this level of production from an employee. I'm getting this.
I feel like this would be an appropriate time to hit pause and do an Ignite Spot commercial. Do you have your spreadsheet? Do you know your numbers?
Yep.
Sorry, carry on.
No, you're great. And so you're looking at it saying you expect a certain level of production out of an employee. Yeah. Are they delivering that or not? Because if they're not, that means they're making their coworkers' life or they're making your life harder than it needs to be. Mm-hmm. Someone is suffering because someone is not producing to a level that you're expecting. Mm-hmm. So I try and look at it and say, yes, this is a nice person, but this person is affecting 5 other employees that I really love as well. And if one employee is impacting other people or is impacting your well-being, unfortunately, harder decisions generally have to be made.
Yeah.
I think I think a good example of this, and whether you agree with him or not in his ideology, when Elon Musk bought Twitter.
Yeah. I was thinking about this.
Like this is a whole thing. Like there was 2 different perceptions on what the business should be. The prior owners had an ideology of managing and controlling content and doing things, and his is not in the way that he presents, right? He cuts a whole bunch of employees, and people ask him, like, was it hard with it? He's like, it turns out you don't need that many people to have a open communication type platform. Yeah. And so people are frustrated because they're used to what it was and they love it and they're emotionally connected to it. Values change and perceptions change. But at the same time, the company is still able to perform to his expectation based off of what's going on with it. Whether you agree with it or not, it's a good example of the perception of the people, of the things. Oftentimes, to your point, it affects everybody else. And is it the right wave to keep those people there just because we like them or they've been here for a long time?
Yeah, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen with that business anyway, because talk about some sunk costs. He's put a couple dollars into that thing. He's bet his business strategic intelligence on this, like this is the right way to go with this. And now it would be really hard if I was in his chair. It would be really hard to be like, actually screwed up on this one, shouldn't have spent all that money, did the wrong thing. I really don't know what I'm doing. That's hard to do in a business world. So I'm sort of watching this to see how it's going to play out.
Well, but you can see him, he's double downing on his original ideology around how the platform should become. Yeah. And it's easy for him to say, I mean, most recently it was, who cares what these people who are giving us money for advertising are saying? It's not how the platform's going to be run. Well, if you don't generate revenue, a system can't run. There has to be that context that at some point in time turns around. And man, would it be hard to accept it. Maybe we don't know his grand plan. Hopefully there's something for him that will turn out for everybody else too. But man, that's a really tough position to be put in. But you have to sometimes be comfortable stepping away from what you felt was the right move.
I don't think he's going to walk away from this profitable. I think he's going to walk away angry at somebody and pointing a finger at somebody for a reason why it didn't work as expected. It won't be his fault, of course. I think it will be somebody else's fault. But I just don't see how this can pan out. There's too much emotion, money, time, reputation sort of staked on it for it to go well now. You can't make a good decision when you've got all those things kind of piled in.
Well, and societal impact too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of emotion from everything on the outside too playing into it.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's interesting that you said that, Eddie, that it's not his fault. I mean, how many CEOs are out there saying they've got these sunk costs, whether they're employees or something else? They're making decisions that are negatively impacting their business, and they're looking at it saying, it's not my fault. I'm here to tell you, it's your fault. And ultimately, you have to make the decision that changes the path that you're on. And so if you're sinking your emotions, money, time, energy, whatever it is, into something, and it's not working, and you don't change it, it's your fault. That doesn't mean that it's the bad thing to do, but it is your fault.
Yeah, I love that. One of the I have a client that we used to work on, is no longer a client anymore, but in the early stages of our business. And I won't say names, but you'll know who exactly I'm talking about. These two guys will. But I used to go to business meetings with this person. And we live in Utah. And so our sports team here in Utah is the Utah Jazz. That's our basketball team. And everybody knows what Junior Jazz is. It's sponsored by the Jazz organization. So all of the kids run around in Junior Jazz jerseys, and that's how we play our basketball. Well, I remember sitting at a table, and as the accountant, I'm calculating this person's finances, and they are just tanking, losing money like crazy. Can't keep track of cash flow. This person's spending money left, right, and center on ridiculous things that have nothing to do with the business. But in his mind, they do. And I remember going to a meeting, and his whole team is sat around the table, and he's standing at the head of it with his hands on the table, and he's screaming at them saying, I'm the equivalent of Michael Jordan, and you're all a bunch of Junior Jazz basketball players, right? And I was just like, whoa. But he was so emotionally vested in his business and the decisions he made, he wasn't willing to say, hold on, maybe I've got too much vested. I need to get some distance and actually talk to my accountant, the people I've hired that I trust, and let's actually get intelligent about this. He was never willing to turn bad ideas off. He just threw more money at them and was just saying, it's going to work, it's going to work, it's going to work. And eventually they went out of business. So it's a real thing. And I like how Ryan looked right at the camera and said, it is your fault. We're not here to point fingers today, but I think one critical skill that every entrepreneur needs to have is the willingness to take responsibility for the decisions of the business. right? To not point other fingers. So we've talked about selling businesses. We've talked about starting new businesses and how to know when you should turn those off, right? Give yourself a time limit with a set amount of money you're willing to lose. We've talked about employees. I think you could probably take the same strategy with an employee, couldn't you? Say, I'm going to create a policy in my company that says every new employee gets 3 months and whatever, right? But at 3 months, you have to have a hard review to say, is this person meeting the criteria? Doesn't matter if they're sick or their family has a disease that they're getting through or whatever. Like, you have to, that sounds heartless, but you have to do what's right for all of the people in the company, right? I've seen too many entrepreneurs say, but this person needs a job and this person has to work here. They cost a ton and they're ruining our company, but I can't let them go because their daughter needs something. I love that form of charity, but that can't last forever, right, Ryan?
Right. Absolutely.
I mean,
I think a good example of this is we had an employee that worked with us for several years, and they were a really great employee, but their emotion changed and our business changed. Their desire to keep doing what we were doing was not where their heart was. And our business had changed on what types of services we had offered. We had restructured some different things, and after a couple of months, we finally sat down and just had an honest conversation between the two of us. And the reality of it was both of us had an agreement at the end of the conversation, it was time for them to move on to another opportunity because we weren't aligned anymore.
Yeah.
Man, we could have helped each other out had we had that conversation 3, 6, 12 months earlier. But we put ourselves in a situation where it's like, well, we like them. Yeah. We think they're great. And they were frustrated because they're like, this isn't what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think those are some of those things where sometimes just being that honest with yourself on what's going on actually sometimes changes the way those people's opportunities become. And sometimes they need a little push just as much as we need a little push to be able to get where we're supposed to be.
Yep. Yeah, I love it. So the third area I think we should focus on before we wrap up the show today is marketing. I think marketing is a place where lots of money is squandered and the ROI really isn't there. And so what happens is an entrepreneur gets a really great idea to run a new marketing campaign, or they get an email. Hey, if you buy our thing, our new cool widget or software program, we'll get 800 clients for you, and it's going to be all it's going to take is $400,000 down payment or whatever it is, right? Like, there's so many ways out there to spend money on marketing. And so I would love for Ryan to sort of give us some thoughts on how to approach a new marketing campaign, because every time I get one of these wild-haired marketing ideas, I have to go to Ryan and say, here's what I want to do. And then Ryan always has sort of a structured conversation with me. So walk me through how you would have that conversation.
Yeah. So if you've got a new marketing idea, what you've got to actually decide is, one, how much time you're willing to invest in something, what you think that return is going to be for doing it. And you actually have to do some type of analysis on it. Mm-hmm. It's the entrepreneur comes, says, oh, I found this company that's going to do this for us, or I've decided I'm going to do this from a marketing standpoint, and it's going to be great. Well, what does great mean? And so if you're going to do it, you have to come in understanding, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to measure success, and this is where I'm actually going to decide if this is going to work or not. Mm-hmm. And that's so hard. Marketing's a great example because it is an idea of, how do I present myself to someone else? It's you saying, how am I going to dress today? How am I actually going to present myself to the world? And when you put on an outfit and someone looks at you and says, you're ugly, you don't like that. And so
he looked at me.
It's a bad day. Wow, you're ugly.
But I dressed myself. I picked this outfit out, and this is what I wanted.
Note, Ryan is colorblind and has often come to work in some interesting color choices.
Absolutely.
We said, Ryan, go home and change that.
I love your point, though, because I think a good example of this was with e-commerce. Within e-commerce, there's a lot of times where we start running these campaigns because we feel like it's going to bring in some new, solid, great revenue. Yeah. The problem is we didn't do enough analysis on what the expectation was with it, or we didn't do enough testing with it to where oftentimes that marketing campaign or that discount, whatever we offered, actually ends up taking our margins completely, and they lose mass amounts of money because they didn't evaluate it correctly, or they potentially let it run too long from that perspective, or they don't understand their margins well enough. And so I think it's one of those areas, to your point, you have to be really comfortable being okay walking away was sometimes that bad idea, because you
please.
put yourself in a position where the company's being hurt because that system didn't work. The
Yeah.
thought process didn't work.
Yeah, it's okay to turn a marketing campaign off. I think for some reason we feel like if it failed, that I'm a failure, right?
Yeah.
Like we've linked a business, a hire, a marketing campaign to us, and so if it didn't go right, my goodness, I'm not good at what I do. I'm not, and I think you need to get away from that mindset and instead think of yourself more like a scientist in a laboratory. Like, we're going to try this experiment. Okay, that didn't go according to the theory or the hypothesis. Let's change this liquid out. Try again. That's how you should be behaving, not, oh my gosh, I tried an experiment, didn't work. I'm going to go, sit in a bar and get totally plastered now and just give up on life. That's not how a business owner should think.
Athletes are great examples of this too. I mean, baseball, sub 300 hitting average is pretty common.
Yeah.
Like
which isn't great.
You're going to hit 3 out of 10,
good, yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
right? From that perspective.
But you're doing good there.
But you're doing good based off of the circumstances. And I think that's one of those things you have to understand that for your business as a whole too. Like, what is okay and what is not okay? What risks are okay taking on? And maybe your risk is only a $10,000 opportunity.
Yeah.
And you have to be comfortable setting that framework so that in the future you don't put yourself in a bind where you can't also even climb out of the hole you put yourself into.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because marketing is one of those areas that's a little exciting. It can potentially be the sexy side of the business, right? Where, oh, if we just get the right marketing campaign, we could make millions. It's a bit of a gambling thing, It's like going to Vegas, and if you roll the dice just right, guys, we hit it, And so there's that thing that kind of makes you not think intelligently sometimes.
Yeah, and so we've talked a lot about the philosophy around it, and I think that's great. But now you ask me the question, how do we actually approach it? And I think it's important to understand when you approach a marketing campaign that you're coming in saying, I'm going to put some money into this. Mm-hmm. You're going to determine how much money you're willing to waste, as Dan put it. And it really is, how much money are you willing to waste in your marketing campaign? Because it might not bear any fruit. But then what becomes important is people just throw money at it. Well, I want you to be able to measure something every single month. You want to be able to measure how many new leads that marketing campaign produced per month. How many more eyeballs are actually looking at your website, coming into your store, doing whatever it is. So I did a marketing campaign. We saw 50 more people walk inside the door compared to what normal traffic is from our storefront. Or we had this many more viewers to our website in a month. We want to be able to see, are people actually responding to this? So first, are we getting more leads? Second, are we actually converting those leads into sales? And so the next question is not only are we getting more eyeballs, are we getting the right eyeballs walking into our store or looking at our website? And you have to start tracking these analytics to say, what are we actually getting in return for our investment in marketing? And if you can't measure it, you need to stop for a second and start understanding how you can measure the success of any sunk cost you have, whether it's marketing or anything else. You have to measure it. And so many people just come in and say, here's money, and I'm going to keep putting at it, and I'm hoping it's going to work. If you can't measure it, there's a problem. You have to be able to measure it.
Yeah, I really like that, how you're pointing out that you need to take a moment, take a breath, and see if you can measure something. I mean, I know that you're really excited to launch this new marketing campaign because it could solve all of your financial problems and help you buy an island and a helicopter one day. I don't know what you're trying to do, but are you really missing that much if you put a buffer before every marketing campaign and say, I'm gonna get my idea, and before I hit go on those Google ads or whatever I'm gonna do, I'm gonna always give myself 1 week, right? And in that 1 week, I'm gonna talk to my accountant, and we're going to sit down and we're going to set some goals and some metrics, and we're going to figure out how to measure the success of this thing. I think you're just so dang excited that you just grab money and throw and hope, right? It really is a craps table sort of approach at times. And then entrepreneurs often come back saying, oh, marketing doesn't work and that's a total waste of money. And well, maybe it would have worked if you'd have just started off appropriately with the right expectations and set some ground rules. But just throwing money at stuff, that's like a 1 in 10 chance.
Yeah. I think there's two ratios, or there's two things I like to look at when it comes to this. One is customer acquisition cost, or they call it CAC for short. You're determining how much resources, you're determining how much resources you're putting into it to acquire a ongoing customer or a one-time event, right?
Yeah.
You're factoring in your human capital, you're factoring in the cost for the marketing, you're factoring in all those kind of pieces as a part of it. This is what it took to get that person to buy. The other one is actually cost per lead.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another area where it's the same context, where it's like how many people came in or attempted to buy. You can use both of those metrics for pretty much any type of business when it comes to your marketing strategy. They're going to vary depending on the numbers that they should be. E-commerce is going to be vastly different than a professional service organization, which is going to be vastly different than, a brick and mortar, electronics store. But understanding those two numbers really help you to understand where you should be and if you're being successful in the attempt that you're trying to go through. And sometimes it requires a little bit of research to understand what the market is perceiving based off of those numbers for your type of industry too. And so that's where, to your point, your accountant can help you in that context, or research on Google can help you give that context really, really well too, because there's a lot of people trying to help with those two numbers and help people get transparency with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Well, so here's something we'd like you to think about if you've been watching this episode. We hope you got something out of this. You're going to go to work today as an entrepreneur, and you're going to be faced with many decisions today. And here's the challenge. I like the term sunk cost, because if you're on a boat, you kind of know when it's sinking, right? You can see the water coming on, you can see it's going down, and you know when something in your business is sinking, even though you might not want to admit it. And you probably have 2 or 3 or maybe even 10 of those things happening in your business right now. I think every business has a couple boats sinking, right? And it takes somebody that's a little independent from your emotional stance to say, hey, are you aware that this is sinking, and kind of help you through that. So if you can get a mentor, a coach, a colleague, an entrepreneur network, anybody that you can talk to that can give you some outside insight, a CFO, an accountant, whatever, that's going to be critical. But we'd like to encourage you today to just try and be a little more honest with yourself and admit that you've got some things that are sinking, and know that that's okay. It's perfectly normal to have some things sinking in a business. That's supposed to happen. Not everything is supposed to be floating. But for the stuff that is sinking and it's kind of just eating at you, we'd like to challenge you today to try to identify all of the emotions and costs and energies that you've attached to this sinking boat, that have made it feel more important than it really is, that have made it feel more necessary than it really is. And then ask yourself, if I hadn't put that money, that energy, that time into this thing, what would I pay for it today? And if the answer is less than it's giving you in return, that's called a bad business decision, right? And it is time to turn that off. And so our call to you is to have courage today and be willing to say no to things, to turn things off, to free up cash flow for more profitable things, to let the negative employee go, unfortunately, to close out the 3 of the 6 LLCs you started because they're sucking up money. Whatever it is, those things all need your honest and best decision-making capability. Anything else you guys want to say to that before we wrap up today?
I would just say really quickly in closing, understand your values. People value time, they value money, they value relationships, and a lot of times sunk costs keep happening because one of those values is misaligned, meaning that you are valuing your time more than you're valuing money, or you're valuing money more than you're valuing your relationships with people. Whatever it is, usually sunk costs happen because out of those big 3 values, you're a little misaligned.
Mm-hmm. And one of you had mentioned blinders. That's because you can't see the other 2. You're so focused on the one, you've lost sight of the others.
I love that we're talking about this, especially at the start of the year, because I think this is one of those pieces as people are setting goals or expectations for what they're trying to do in their businesses. They get the choice and the option to be able to take that step back, to think and evaluate how your business is performing, think and evaluate the people on your team, the ideologies, the strategies you've done. And to Ryan's point, you have to set things away and realign with what your goals and what your outcomes are and what your values are to make sure you can make good decisions about those.
Yep.
2023 is gone.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at this point in time. And so we have to be comfortable taking that and making that as a part of our choice and decision to move forward.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Hey, if you found this episode helpful, we want to thank you for watching and listening. Just to let you know, we recently launched our podcast on all of the podcast channels from Apple iTunes to Spotify, and Google Podcasts is now going away in favor of YouTube Podcasts, but we're up there as well. So it would really mean a lot if you're finding value in these conversations. Our goal is to help you build a more profitable business, not just to stay in business. But if that message is ringing true for you, please take a second to support the show and go to iTunes and just give the show a rating. You can go down and you can select 1, 2, 3, 4, or thankfully 5 stars if you choose to do that, and leave us a little message to tell us how we're doing. Those reviews allow other people to see if this is a show worth listening to, and it also tells Apple iTunes that, hey, we should promote this show a little bit. So thank you so much for watching or listening, and until next week, stay profitable and keep growing that business.